Reactions have trailed the announcement of Kashim Shettima as the vice presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress. The Northern Elder Forum has suggested that things could have happened to the APC presidential candidate Bola Tinubu following the decision to settle for a Muslim ticket in 2023. Spokesman for the group, Dr. Hakeem Babajide, says Christians will walk away from his ticket, but Muslims will vote for him. In a series of tweets, the NEF spokesperson, however, pointed that opting for a Muslim ticket won't make any difference in Tinubu's electoral fortune. According to Babajide, note that Bat has decided on Muslim, three things are possible. All Christians will walk away from his ticket. All Muslims will line up behind his ticket. It will not make any difference to his electoral fortunes. Also, the Middle Belt Forum, MBF, has hit the All Progressive Congress and its presidential candidate for the Muslim presidential ticket, stressing that it is a danger to the collective well-being and unity of the country. National President of MBF, Petrus Pogu, while speaking in Makurdi, the Benue State capital, described the choice as unfortunate development while calling it an evil plot that Nigerians will defeat in 2023. Pogu said that the choice is indicative of ignorance and insensitivity of the APC to the mood and pains of Nigerians at a point in time. In his words, it is an unfortunate development. Unfortunate in the sense that we are living in a terrible period where the country is being tormented by insurgents from every part of the place, starting from Borno to Boko Haram, and Shettima is from there. And such is coming down without consideration for the plurality of the country with regards to region, religion, and other issues. I think it's an unfortunate development, end of quote. And the convener of the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, Chief Edwin Clark, has criticized the decision of the APC presidential candidate to settle for a Muslim ticket. Clark argued that the APC's choice is not inclusive and is not good for a secular state like Nigeria. He says in compliance with constitutional provisions of inclusiveness, number one and number two positions in the country have always been occupied by practitioners of major religions to ensure balancing. Clark alluded that the actions of the APC are pointers to the confirmation and actualization of report of an attempt to Islamize the country. Similarly, the Christian Association of Nigeria, Kaduna State Chapter, has condemned a Muslim ticket of the All Progressive Congress. It says the preference for a Muslim ticket does not only offend the sensibility of Christian community, but also negates Nigeria's constitutional principle of federal character. According to CAN, the move by the APC is one that does not promote national unity, cohesion, and mutual understanding between the two leading faiths in the country. CAN says it is determined to sacrifice everything to defend the interests of the church in Nigeria.
Arguments have been deduced out there that no, we are not looking, we couldn't find a competent Christian. We ask ourselves, how can someone talk about competence when you talk about Christians? The fact about it is that in the north of Nigeria, if you are looking for the best brain, if you choose 10, 8 of them will be Christians. So you can tell us that you didn't find a competent Christian. And there is no party in Nigeria that is exclusively a religious party. All the political parties have people of different faiths in it. So just as the party have people of different faiths, is to show that the party is a national party, carries a national outlook. But to completely disrespect, disregard, and abandon a whole section as if you don't care, whatever. Okay, we are just trying to say that what has happened is condemnable, it is not right, it is not proper, but it has given us with a good option that we have a choice.
Meanwhile, Lagos State Governor Mr. Babajide yesterday urged Yoruba people to see the aspiration of the All Progressive Congress APC presidential candidate, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, as their priority to enable him actualize his dream of becoming Nigeria's president in 2023. Sanwo-Olu made the plea while speaking as a special guest of honor in the grand finale of the 2022 edition of the Ojude Oba Festival held in Ijebu-Ode, Ogun State, and he said there were more to benefit by Nigerians and Nigerians if Tinubu becomes the next president in 2023. This is at President Muhammadu Buhari at a meeting with governors of his party yesterday in Daura, Katsina State, pacified the aggrieved state chief executives over the manner Tinubu announced his running mate Kashim Shettima on Sunday, saying the leakage of his plan to a section of the media forced Tinubu to take the initiative. A lot to talk about this morning, Tundu.
Yes, that decision from Tinubu to choose a Muslim ticket continues to raise dust, as it was always obvious that it was going to, quite frankly. The tea leaves were quite clear. There had been calls before this move, when it looked like he might be considering that for the sake of winning votes, because the argument that was being advanced by APC when Asiwaju Tinubu emerged as the presidential candidate was that he's a Southern Muslim, so convention dictates he should choose a Northern Christian. But which one of the Northern Christians is a massive political powerhouse? Apparently none in his own estimation, which is why he has gone this way. And in the run-up to this decision, voices like the Christian Association of Nigeria, different political figures and stakeholders had already expressed their complete disapproval of that decision, which he ended up making, which means he turned a deaf ear to those voices. And like I said yesterday, it is a huge political gamble. We'll see if it pays off or not. Because when I think about the huge row over it, I do wonder how many of us are really Christians and Muslims in this country. How many of us actually live by the faiths that we profess? Do we just cling to these labels that most people are born into? It's your father's religion that you tend to claim, apart from a few exceptions like me. But do we just cling to these labels and get all hysterical over politics? Because it's really, if it was that important in the way we live our daily lives, we would have a completely different Nigeria than what we have today. And that's just the fact of the matter. But the fact of the matter is also that people do use these labels to divide and to score political points and to extract political vengeance. And that might happen in this case. We also saw with the PDP, the huge resistance to the PDP choosing a Northern presidential candidate. There were all kinds of appeals, all kinds of calls from all over the country that the PDP should choose a person from the Southeast specifically, or at the very least the South, but ideally from the Southeast. And all that fell on deaf ears as well. So it just goes to show there's a certain tone deafness with our leadership. They simply do not listen. They will go the way they choose and what is politically expedient for them. And this is coming from the two major parties. And one thing that has never been rewarded in politics and in life in general is complacency. If you do not listen to certain voices, will you remain the two major political parties, or will the political landscape change? Because at one point in time, there was no such thing as APC, now was there? So you never know what can come out of this 2023 election if this gamble from Asiwaju Tinubu backfires in his face, as it might, but it also might not. It all remains to be seen. So I think he imagines that it's worth the risk.
Dr. Batu?
Okay. I think I wrote at length on this subject today, and that's in this day newspaper. I've also read the opinion by G.T. Ogunye, who talks about crying over religion in the thicket of troubles. And I'll come to his piece shortly. I've also read Itimatum's essay on the same subject. A plethora of opinions having emerged in the last 24 hours on the subject of the Muslim ticket of the APC. Now, so what I'm going to say is a combined reading of my own essay on the subject, G.T. Ogunye, Itimatum, and all the other opinions that have been expressed. And it is as follows. One, what all of this demonstrates is that religion, which is supposed to bind people together, is dividing us in this country. And it is not something that anybody can discount. In a statement announcing his choice of Kashim Shettima, senator, former governor, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu said, yes, he's aware of concerns that have been expressed, but the question at stake is not Shettima's faith. But you can see that people have a different opinion. It's not just this Christian Association of Nigeria. Even atheists, have a different opinion. They say, look, in this country, we have to pay attention to diversity, and that Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu should not discount the importance of diversity. He says he wants to run a different dispensation, place emphasis on competence. And people ask the question, and there are no competent people among the people of the North who are Christians. So all this back and forth on the basis of the argument simply shows that Nigerians are very sentimental when it comes to the issue of religion. They are very emotional because of the manner in which religion has divided us, despite the fact that the Constitution says very clearly in Section 10 that, look, no state, the Federation or any part thereof shall not adopt any religion as state religion. which means that there should be a separation between how the state is run, qua state, and people's prejudices, sentiments, biases, religious beliefs. Even if the Constitution goes for that in Section 38, to say that it recognizes the freedom of thought and religion and all of that. Now, G.T. Ogunye takes off from there. Yesterday, some groups have said, oh, the choice of a Muslim ticket is unconstitutional. And he argues robustly in his piece today that, look, there is nowhere in the Constitution of Nigeria where religion is made a major consideration for political issues. He cited many examples, that in Section 153, Section 177, Section 182, all of those sections, Section 14.3 and 4, dealing with federal character, Section 15, subsection 2, dealing with the idea of national integration without discrimination. And even in the Oath Act, there is no place where the Nigerian Constitution says, oh, you must do Muslim, you must do Christian, or you must do atheist. That this is something that emerged because of the problems we have in the country. And it goes back to that original argument about the awkwardness of religion, faith-based choice of political gladiators. To say that, look, the same 1993 example that they are citing of Bashorun, MK Abiola and Babagana Kingibe, that it was not an issue. That in fact, that Muslim ticket even united the country rather than divide it. And that if you were to interrogate the person of Bashorun, MK Abiola, that he attended a Baptist secondary school and that he could sing Christian hymns successfully, even better.
Christian hymns.
Even better than
I sang his Christian hymns, Irawadidoni Bethlehem, as a member of the school choir in my secondary school.
So that even better,
Yeah.
even better than Christians, he being a product of the Baptist denomination. His being a Muslim was not an issue. The issue was about the change that Nigerians wanted. He also cited the other examples we have cited on this program. Awolowo and Philippe Emeadi, Azikiwe and Ishaya Audu, and how the Shagari government went in the case of Awolowo versus Shagari after the election of 1979. Our religion was not the big issue before the courts of Nigeria. And his argument is that rather than talking about religion, rather than talking about faith, there are serious problems to worry about. Issues of governance, right? Who is that person who can lead this country forward? We are at a moment of crisis. So there are good Christians, there are bad Muslims, there are bad Muslims, there are, good Christians. It's not their faith that is the issue. All the persons who have been leading us, they all go for Umrah, they all go for pilgrimage in Jerusalem, and yet see where they have left us. So it's not their religion, he argues, and I agree with him, that is the issue. But what are their ideas? What he calls ticket of troubles. I don't want to start overquoting myself. That my own article is available. That would be a unnecessary masturbation for me to quote myself in a stencil. But I agree with the point, that he raised, that we should focus more on what he calls the ticket of troubles. Okay? And those troubles are very well known. If you have a combination of Tinubu and Shetima, what do they want to do about petrol subsidy? What do they want to do about the pandemic of empty pockets? What ideas do they have about job creation? If they don't have any serious ideas, then of course, the major point is the point with which I concluded with today, that Nigerians have a choice. We have 18 political parties. If you don't like their Muslim ticket, then don't vote for them. The whole essence of democracy is that you have the right to choose. What the state needs to do is to make sure that Nigerian people are given the opportunity to choose freely and that their votes will count. Of course, Etimetum, whose article I also cited, thinks that, it's a mistake, it's a miscalculation for Asiwaju Bola Tinubu to have chosen a Muslim. Okay, that's another argument. Further expanded upon by Christian leaders of thought, by nationalist leaders like Chief E.K. Clark. Okay, they also have their own argument. For the simple reason that religion has continued to divide us in this country, that despite the existence of groups like Interfaith Dialogues and NIREC, Nigeria Inter-Religious Council, Nigerians, still think of their faith and they are divided along those lines. Even if all these people who carry Bible, who carry Quran, or who say they are atheists, when they get into this same government, there is a yawning gap between what we call private morality and public morality. They go to church on Sunday. They go to mosque on Friday. And what has that done for Nigeria?
Okay. I hear that argument, and that's a good argument in balancing things out. So, yeah, religion doesn't matter competence, but I just hope I have the time. Religion matters in Nigeria, as it matters anywhere else in the world, except we want to deceive ourselves. The bastion of democracy, America has been a democratic nation, if I can remember, since 1778, over 200 years. But in the last elections, a couple of years back in 2012, a certain Barack Obama, which is an evangelical Christian to a lot of people, was up against a certain Mitt Romney, which is a Mormon. The evangelicals made it clear that despite the fact that evangelicals have a leaning towards Republicans, but a Mormon wasn't going to sell for them. First case. Second case. The elections that brought about Kennedy, his Catholic faith was talked about. Even the election that brought about Joe Biden recently, we're still being reminded that Joe Biden is the second Catholic president in America. Coming back to Nigeria, the same politicians that are saying the problems are bigger than religion, but these are the politicians that set the country alight across religious lines. These are the politicians that have special concessions for travel fares for religious activities. Is the government supposed to subsidize religious travel? But these are the politicians that do that based on religious connotation. These are the politicians that go to churches and mosques to go and campaign. Doesn't that mean something? Why are they going to churches and mosques? Why are people like Father Mbaka relevant today in this country? Because politicians made them relevant. So when politicians come and say that religion does not matter, it is like saying that Tundu is not a host on the morning show. That's how crystal clear it is. These same politicians have exploited religion when it benefited them. This talk about Muslim North, Christian South, who started enunciating that conversation? It's not the political class. This same politician talked about balancing in 2015. And that's why I've repeatedly asked the question, why not the Muslim ticket? And Tundu, because everybody makes reference to MK Abiola, Daddy, your dad, in 1993. And that ticket, Tundu, that ticket sailed because of number one, how extraordinary a human being MK Abiola was. And secondly, Tundu, most importantly, Nigerians were tired of the military and they wanted to get them out any way possible. And let's not forget that the military had dribbled in the past. At first, they said they were going to go, leading up to the 1991. They didn't go. They extended the dates. That was the emergence of the word Maradona. So Nigerians wanted anything. And because of the popularity of the man, religion didn't matter because Nigerians were facing a bigger behemoth, which was the military. Yes, other people make arguments that it's not in the Constitution. Yes, Constitution is the ground norm. But also there's something called convention. If convention doesn't matter, why didn't the APC put forward, after 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, another northern tickets to continue after President Muhammadu Buhari? Why must power come south if convention of religion doesn't matter? Why must power come to south? We must as well continue with the northern person. And if in the spirit of convention doesn't matter, let's continue with the northern person. Yeah, because, it's competence, isn't it? So let's continue that way if religion doesn't matter. In wrapping up, I will remind people that, see, leaders think of the next generation. Politicians think of the next election. It is time for leaders to rise up in Nigeria and think of the next generation of cohesion in this country. That's all on News Headlines.
Our dependable Rota Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rota.
Good morning, Tunde. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, we're focusing on the United Nations Population Prospects Report for 2022. They release it every 2 years. It was supposed to be released in 2021, but it was delayed by the COVID pandemic. So, they cover the entire world, basically. So, a lot of key points coming out of this report. One being that the world's population, according to their projections, is going to hit 8 billion by the end of this year. Also, they stated that I think India is projected to surpass China as the country with the largest population in the world. And basically, you're seeing a combination of low fertility rates in the developed world combined with improved healthcare that is leading to, so basically, women in the developed worlds are having less children, and people are living longer because of better healthcare facilities. So you combine those two, and then that's why you've got populations growing. There's even a chart where you can see the declining trajectory of world population. So you're looking at the population growth rates spiked over, I think, about 3-4% in about 1965 or so, but progressively up until 2021, it's fallen below 1%, and it's projected to fall. I love our world in data. It's you nerd out on this site. I overlaid Nigeria's population with the world population. Take a look at the second chart here, and you'll see Nigeria's population, there it is. So you can see the massive gap where we are still, what was that? 3, yeah, we're still well over, just under 2.5%, 2.4, 2.3. But you can see that you can overlay as many different countries as you want. So we're generally still growing. So they now looked at, what is it called now? The developing nations as well as developed nations, and sub-Saharan Africa is projected, I believe, to be to account for more than half of global growth from, I think, about the 2040s from about the 2030s up until 2050. So SSA, Sub-Saharan Africa, is supposed to be responsible for 50% of that growth. And the thing is, the natural question that you get with that is, okay, what do you then do to be able to sustain this type of growth as far as infrastructure is concerned? There's a quote. Let's take a look at this quote here from the report. More than half of the projected increase in global population up until 2050 will be concentrated in just 8 countries: Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, India, Nigeria, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Tanzania. At the bottom there, they said countries of sub-Saharan Africa are expected to continue growing through 2100 and to contribute more than half of the global population increase anticipated through 2050. So they're growing. I think there's also a quote on fertility. In 2021, fertility levels high enough to sustain positive growth were found in sub-Saharan Africa. Look at that, 4.6 births per woman. Oceania, excluding Australia and New Zealand, 3.1. Northern Africa, very key, and Western Asia, 2.8. Central Africa, 2.3. Then it says some countries, including several in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, continue to experience high levels of adolescent fertility. In 2021, 13.3 million babies, or about 10% of the total worldwide population, were born to mothers under 20 years old. Lots of health implications with that. They then talked about the demographic dividend for African nations. developed nations have got a lot of aging populations, the baby boomers. They are nearing retirement. Japan is one of those examples. Europe is another example. The older they get, they retire. They then depend more on healthcare facilities. They also then depend on pensions. Those two metrics put strains on the public finances of nations as well as healthcare and so on and so forth. But Africa, the report pointed out, is in a population sweet spot where most of your population is young and they are working, right? So essentially the demographic dividend, and if you think about dividends as what you get from investing in stocks and so on and so forth, that's in an investment context. But within a population context, the demographic dividend is the economic growth that a nation can glean, can yield from its working population. That means that, and it's time bound. The report said this is time bound. So you've got a limited time to invest as much in human capital development and education in that working population to be able to yield or to get the gains from them. If you don't move fast enough, it will pass you by. Which then, of course, brings up the issue of education in Nigeria and the fact that we are not investing as much as we should in education. What is it now? 19 million children are now out of school. So essentially, there's the whole issue of whether or not infrastructure is able to meet up with population growth. You know, when you think about power, when you think about healthcare resources, when you think about pensions and everything, all to that, it all brings it to bear. So there's a lot to glean from the. I mean, also I think they've projected Nigeria as the 6th most populous nation in the world at 216 million or so. So, there's a lot that's positive from the reports, but only if there is the required action to follow it. And we always talk about this every time this report comes out. Then when it goes away, we stop talking about it. Then when it comes out again, we talk. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to.
And the sad reality is we don't look at it. And this is a critical report because when you extrapolate the data and look at it deeply, I think apart from China, Nigeria is the only country that's adding about 5 million to its population every year. So China adds about 5 million and a couple of other hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, they're declining, because China's declining,
Yeah, and that's for a mass population of about over 1 billion.
1.4.
1.4 billion. But Nigeria is adding second highest, 5 million population year on year. And that cascades into the population growth going to 3% that we're talking about. And as that is increasing, also when you look at the state of our economy, decreasing. So we're growing less than the population growth. Ideally, it is supposed to be a good thing because you're supposed to put that population to work by opening up the economy for them. But we're missing it. We're going amiss. When China had their boom, straight up the 70s into the 80s, returned to after Chairman Mao, and there was a new form of thinking, and Deng Xiaoping came in and all of that. They started putting theirs to industrialization. And that's why when you look at the bulk of China's growth was between 1990 up to year 2000 when they joined the World Trade Organization. And the growth accelerated from 2015 and it went ballistic. Because they were putting that bulk of population to use. They're building factories, they were industrializing real quick and they were doing things real quick. If we're smart, we should put this bulk of young Nigerians to use. You know what is now happening? We are now exporting this bulk of young Nigerians
to other countries.
To Europe to be able to buffer the economy. And I'm happy you talked about Japan. Because of the aging population in Japan, there's a big problem in Japan. That's why the economy have stalled since 1990. Because of that aging population. But we have that population. Then what are we doing? We are exporting them when they're supposed to be beneficial.
Not only are we exporting them, they're here being a bit of a nuisance, quite frankly. When your government cannot utilize population, which should be a resource, then it's just a nuisance value. I remember comments from the former Emir of Kano State on this very topic. And I was wondering who is going to take action. It's one of those things I was hoping President Muhammadu Buhari could do, given the kind of cult-like adoration he commands in certain quarters because of that whole religious aspect. You talked about China. Look at what China had to do. They had to get really draconian, quite frankly, and enforce one child per
policy,
couple, and then two, and they were having forced abortions and what have you. Obviously, I'm not advocating that we go that far,
Right.
but just some kind of awareness of birth control, some kind of awareness about how ruinous it is for the girl and for the society, this issue of child marriage, which you raised here, Reuters. It's really quite disturbing. The number of mothers under 20, what are they doing becoming mothers?
Right.
They should be getting an education.
Exactly.
And now we see that India is overtaking China in terms of population, but India has not suffered what we have suffered in terms of we're bringing these children into the world and not educating them.
Exactly.
14 million Nigerian children out of school, and we keep reproducing. Somebody needs to come and put a stop to this. Where's Thanos when you need him to come and just
snap his fingers?
Yes.
Every July 11th,
Yeah.
we celebrate World Population Day.
Yes.
And it's to draw attention to the strategic value of population, the opportunities and the dangers involved. And for this year, the emphasis is on how world population is growing. It says a population of 8 billion, and nursing opportunities, and also assessing choices and rights for all stakeholders. The emphasis here is on the explosion of population. And this report, the World Population Prospects, I think the main value is for those countries that have been identified and other countries to assess the report, the data, in terms of opportunities and in terms of planning. How do you provide for that population that is ballooning? Look at Nigeria. It's been projected that by 2050, when the world population is about 10.8 billion, that Nigeria is likely to have up to about 450 million people. 450 million people in this environment. We are 206 million just for now, and we are stepping on each other, and resources are inadequate. Which takes us back to an essay. That's Thomas Robert Malthus. In 1798, he wrote a piece called An Essay on the Principle of Population. And what was his argument? Because it's like we're back to 1798. He said if your population is increasing at a geometric rate, and food production is at an arithmetic rate, then of course that's a prescription for chaos and danger. And that is where we have found ourselves now, in a Malthusian situation. He reviewed that essay 6 times. But in 1800, Britain, on the basis of his statement, had to introduce the Census Act of 1800 to address population explosion. Malthus himself had recommendations. He said, what you do, because there will be poverty, there will be low wages, because there will be more people in the world, and you won't be able to cater for them. Labor will become cheap, right? That you have to lower birth rates. Can you lower birth rate in Nigeria? It's big politics, if you try to do population control. He says, okay, if that will not work, what you do is you increase death rates. People say, oh, he's an enemy of the poor. He wanted to kill off the poor people. So what we then find is that countries will need to find a creative way of feeding their people, of providing opportunities for their people. But if you are in a cultural environment where children are considered a blessing from God, then of course it means that countries like ours will find itself in a very difficult place. So that report is not just to celebrate population day. It's for countries like Nigeria, like Tanzania, and those other Democratic Republic of Congo that have been mentioned to see how they can strategize on the basis of the stark realities they've been confronted with. Made worse by the war in Ukraine.
Exactly.
No
wheat. Everybody is running to IMF.
Right.
Well, we're in a very difficult period in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reuters.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Moving on to more business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning. Japanese stocks really leading the losses in Asia. People getting more and more worried about the usual kind of things that they worry about, recession particularly. Tuesday, today, relatively quiet on the data front, not an enormous amount coming. There's a China GDP report later this week, which people will be paying attention to. Bank of Korea will also meet this week. Mainland China markets on a bit of a slowdown after the stringent COVID measures are being brought into play. Global food prices may be falling. This is from the Food and Agriculture Organization, but economists warns that Asia's food costs could still be soaring. In particular, Singapore, South Korea, Philippines and India will see the highest food prices in the second half of the year. That's according to Nomura. Sri Lanka's political chaos actually continues. The crisis talks go on. They, as I understand it, both the president and the prime minister's palace still occupied by protesters. Crowds actually demanding that they both step down. That was yesterday, very dramatic day yesterday. The two opposition parties have been holding talks about what might happen. But remember that any help from the outside world, including the IMF, who've not walked away but are looking at it, is predicated on political stability. And that still is not happening in that country. As you've already reported quite significantly, India set to overtake China as the world's most popular country in 2023. That's according to the UN. You've already talked about the ways and means of that. But in the statement, the UN General Secretary, Antonio Guterres, talks of a shared responsibility to care for our planet. Let's go to the United States. Stock futures declining, really. A week looking ahead to inflation numbers and also a very volatile second quarter earnings season. Gap down again today as the CEO and president is stepping down from her position. The Dow all over the place really yesterday, but basically falling. Investors are preparing to examine some of these reports they're getting from companies to try to find out how they're dealing with rising inflationary pressures and also supply chain problems. Twitter is saying that Elon Musk's request to terminate the deal is invalid and wrongful. That's what they're saying at the moment. We talked yesterday about them employing lawyers. The only people who are going to gain out of this, presumably, are the lawyers, but certainly Mr. Musk will not be allowed to walk away free from this if that's indeed what he does. Who knows? Anything could change. As far as the Ukraine is concerned and the EU, I talked about this yesterday. Germany fears that this cutoff, this Russia gas cutoff, supposedly for maintenance work to Nord Stream 1, which is the main pipeline, may become permanent. The economy minister in Germany has warned that every country should be prepared for this, and of course it'll spill out to the whole of Europe, including those which are at the moment not directly dependent upon Russian gas. Will it be used for political leverage? Leave it to you. I would imagine it will be. The UK leadership race, let's turn our attention to the UK. The favourite at the moment, Rishi Sunak, it's turning into a bit of a tax beauty contest. The fact of it is that a lot of these people are harking back to what they regard as one of the big conservative tax cutters, what Rishi Sunak is saying, and he's actually announcing the details of what he's going to say later on this morning. He's saying no tax cuts until we are fiscally responsible in this country. We can talk about taxes. I think we should after I've finished this. The one thing being that Margaret Thatcher, you will know from your history, was renowned as a conservative tax cutter. No such thing, which I will continue to talk to you about if necessary. UK trains set for further disruption, but all the drivers on 8 train companies, the majority of them have voted to strike. There are still ballots outstanding, but it's reckoned that this will be the biggest strike since the 1990s. Retail sales, not surprisingly, falling at the fastest rate since the depths of the pandemic in the UK. Sales in shops and online have now dropped for the 3rd month in a row. That's according to the British Retail Consortium. Boris Johnson, before he goes, no plans to introduce a windfall tax on the electricity firms. What those firms actually do, they don't actually produce anything. All they do is distribute it. But apparently, given that oil and gas probably face them, energy firms will not, or at least there are no new plans for that. Almost finally, oil trading relatively sideways for all the reasons we were talking about yesterday, growth worries and the rest of it. Very little hope being applied to Joe Biden going to Saudi to ask them to, or the UAE to unlock more production. I don't think they will, and nor does anybody else really. And one of the perhaps more, this is very boring, but I think it's quite indicative. Construction commodities like iron ore, coking coal, and deformed bar steel, which apparently is used in reinforced concrete construction, all those are actually falling in price. Now, what this is pointing to is what I was hinting at yesterday, a fall in commodity prices, not for the reasons that we particularly like, but because they worried about a recession. But That has very, very important, I would imagine, I don't know the detail of it, nor does anybody else in the world right now, but what that actually means for inflation in the future. It may not be perhaps as bad as everybody thought. That's the global view.
Michael, let's talk about this tax cut, because it's quite funny that politicians are on that parade of lies again. When are they going to give us a break? The UK's tax to GDP ratio was 85% pre-COVID in 2019. Now, it's 104.6%. During COVID year, the UK took out a debt of 300 billion to be able to give furloughs and palliatives and everything they gave during COVID. 104.6% tax to GDP ratio. The number is over 2 trillion in debt. Who cut taxes with that? What's the sense behind that? I just want to know.
What we're seeing at the moment is a sort of populist thing, which again, the whole process will be whittled down to 2 people eventually. We'll get a result September the 6th. Tax cutting. I mean, a lot of people are talking about Margaret Thatcher being, an example of what you can do to an economy. It's no question that when she was running the country, the economy did better, but she did not cut taxes in a recession. This is a big myth. In 1981, and I do remember this because I reported on it at the time, actually, there were tax increases at the depths of a recession. Everybody thought it was mad. Nothing really happened to reduce taxes until 7 years later, in 1988, when the country was back on its, roughly, and as much as a small economy like ours can be, back on its feet again. I'm absolutely with you on that. I don't think there's any point in cutting taxes right now. We are almost getting a tax cut because the rate at which national insurance has to be paid for employees is actually, the threshold of that is rising. Plus, everybody is going to get a £400 help towards their energy bills in the winter. So, in a sense, that's already been provided, and I don't think there's any question that, like him or not, and again, there will be a lot of people who don't like him. Rishi Sunak actually, in taking on all that debt when it was relatively cheap, saved the economy for the next 10 or 20 years. He will point to that. I think it's absolutely right that he says that you can't have tax cuts at any price. You have to have fiscal responsibility, and things are very, very difficult these days, as you well know. But if you can point towards fiscal responsibility as being a guiding factor before you cut taxes, then I think the rest of the world will take note of that.
But this is why Rishi Sunak is saying that everybody else is basically peddling in fairy tales. A euphemism, I imagine, for blatant lies. And this, I think, is one of the legacies of Boris Johnson, just generally lowering the standard. This, for me, is looking like a George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no more taxes moment. And then you get elected, and you cannot maintain that promise. You fail and you get punished at the polls. It's shaping up to be a bit of a disaster. People should just be a bit more honest, like Rishi Sunak is being. I can't believe I'm saying it, but he's actually standing out as the only one who's actually being straightforward on this issue. That's just the comments. I didn't have a question. Dr. Bati?
Yes, well, yeah, I agree with you. Tax cuts won't fix the UK economy. So basically, it's Rishi Sunak versus the Bojo Tory right. But we'll see how it plays out. Now that the process is being fast-tracked, we'll see who emerges on September 5. But let me go to Sri Lanka. Now, what are we looking at in Sri Lanka? Anarchy? Because that's what it is beginning to look like. The protesters have refused to leave the residencies of the president and the Prime Minister, Wickremesinghe. And they're also even saying that they will not leave until they get genuine change and until the entire parliament is dissolved. 225 go home, the people are saying. The president has tried to flee. They blocked him at the airport. His brother, Basir Rajapaksa, also tried to run away. They did not allow him. Parliament is divided. They can't even decide on who should take over by July 20. So it looks like the chaos that is unfolding in that place is going to be a big one. Second, even the IMF agenda cannot take place in the context of the turmoil that has overtaken that country. You already alluded to that. Now, with all of this, what lessons do you think other countries, particularly developing countries, can learn from this economic crisis in Sri Lanka? Because I think third world countries should begin to think of what can we learn from this chaos going on there.
Well, if you have a ruling family which is deep in the territory of corruption, that's one thing to avoid, and that's pretty obvious. If you're looking towards the help from kind strangers, you don't get that in the world. You get people who want to come in, they give you debt, but the conditions are fairly steep. And I don't care whether it's Russia, China, or the IMF. They will all do that because that's what they do. Russia and China for their own purposes, the IMF because we all independently and indirectly invest in it. That's what's facing Sri Lanka right now. It needs to have political stability. Who would actually lend to a nation which couldn't even form a parliament? As soon as they've done that, I'm sorry about this, but it is chaos at the moment. But as soon as those political parties agree, as soon as they have a firm policy for fiscal rectitude, then I think that people will actually start to reinvest in it. It's very, very sad. It's had its shares of disasters, not least of which the tsunami, which is not that long ago actually, and that killed thousands, if not millions, of people and affected the whole shape of the country. But most of all, it brought its ruling party brought this on itself. It's all being intensified because of the rest of the problems in the world. But this is what if you want to run a country based on corruption, then look at Sri Lanka. That's the question. If you want to base it on fiscal responsibility and you want to form parliament, you have to do that before you join in the rest of the world wanting to invest in you. Simple as that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Right. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Omoro is here with us. Adeso, great to have you. Pleasant morning to you.
Good morning, Rufai. Great to be here. Good morning,
yeah.
Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Bati.
Good morning, Adeso.
Well, morning. Well, let's look at the global figures from the pandemic. This pandemic has been blamed for a lot of things, and rightly so. 556 million infections so far, 6.3 million casualties, and 11.7 billion vaccine doses reported officially, and that's according to the Johns Hopkins University tally. Well, we do know that this virus is unrelenting as the world witnesses a surge in cases for the 4th consecutive week. Scientists are now trying to keep up with new variants. Yes, the very quickly changing virus has spawned yet another super contagious mutant that's worrying scientists as it gains ground in India and pops up in numerous countries, including Australia, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States. Now, scientists say this new variant is called the BA.275. And they're worried that it may be able to spread rapidly and gain ground and also get around immunity from vaccines and previous infections. Now, it is unclear whether it could cause more serious diseases or more disease than other Omicron variants, including the globally prominent BA.5. Here in Nigeria, more than 800 infections were recorded in 6 days, though no deaths were recorded in Nigeria for the period. The epicenter, Lagos, is driving Nigeria's latest COVID-19 surge, accounting for more than 90% of the infections, and that's according to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the NCDC. The agency is also saying that genomic surveillance shows that the Omicron BA.4 and BA.5 are the dominant variant in Nigeria at the moment. The country also risks a 5th wave, and that may just be what we are seeing in Lagos, because from the trend, we see that when there's a spike in Lagos, it heralds a new wave of infection. So we might just be seeing the beginning of a 5th wave, but the authorities haven't said anything yet. You can see out of 880 cases, Lagos accounted for 750 cases there. Moving on, the NPHCDA says in the last 72 hours, Kano State vaccinated the highest number of eligible persons almost 52,000 people were vaccinated in 72 hours in the state. It was quickly followed by Kaduna State, that vaccinated 42,000, and Osun State with 29,000 people. A breakdown of the performing states based on fully vaccinated coverage by zones in Nigeria reveals that Nasarawa had the highest in the North Central. In the Northeast was Adamawa State, while Jigawa came in for Northwest, Abia came in for the Southeast, Delta for the South-South region, and Osun State for the Southwest region. Well, while Nigeria, like many other countries in Africa, struggled to get the population vaccinated with the first and second doses of vaccine, the EU is now recommending that the 27-bloc nation consider giving second coronavirus booster shots to people between the ages of 60 and 79 years, as well as other vulnerable groups in the region. Cases and hospitalizations are on the rise in the region, and the advice yesterday comes after a recommendation in April that people over the age of 80 consider a second booster. And finally, a new summer of love is in full swing after 500 couples celebrated their symbolic wedding over the weekend in the Lincoln Center of New York City. The big fat mass wedding, pardon me to call it that, over 500 couples. Well, that wedding was held for those who either couldn't get married or couldn't invite all family and friends that they wanted during the lockdown in the US. The couples walked in procession before a symbolic ceremony by an imam, a rabbi, and a pastor. Back to you guys.
Well, let's start from New York at the mass re-wedding, which was even attended by Mayor Eric Adams. Well, isn't this what the Bible says in 1 Corinthians verse 13? Tuntun, with your kind permission.
I knew he was going to do that.
1 Corinthians verse 13, which talks about how love conquers everything. And this is a classic demonstration of how love eventually would prevail. COVID didn't allow so many people to wed the way they wanted, but now they have this opportunity to have a re-wedding, as that particular event was called. But the talk is about COVID. We've talked about the BA275, which is a new variant. Noted more in India and also in 10 other countries, including the United States. And you are right that the scientists have not been able to determine how virulent it is, just that it replicates quickly. Well, it's in the nature of viruses to mutate. I've been told that, even the scientists cannot say this is the end life of this particular COVID-19 virus. And what it means simply is that people will need to continue to take responsibility. The experts have said if you take the vaccine, if you take booster shots, then that will protect you, from getting into the throes of a severe disease. So this is a subtle reminder that COVID is still here with us, and it should not be taken for granted. And we've received that reminder also from the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, which says in the last week or so, we've had 880 cases, 750 of those cases from Lagos. And all of this in the context of the Eid festival, and people, jollificating and pepper souping and, having fun during the festive period, which is a trend that we have seen in other parts of the world. But what is the MPA-CDA saying about this? Well, I think the bottom line is that people just have to take responsibility for their own survival. Many Nigerians don't use the mask again. People don't bother. But I think the bottom line is that people have to take responsibility for their own health. Take the vaccine. Take the booster vaccine. Take, whatever precaution you can take. You don't harm yourself by trying to remain alive and by refusing to harm other people, which is also the point that is being made at the EU, in the European Union, that the 27 member countries should encourage their nationals, particularly those between the ages of 60 and older, to take, booster vaccines 4 months after the first booster vaccine. So the residual point there is that, look, if you take the vaccine, you take the booster, well, at least it doesn't mean you won't get infected. So there will be infections, but the vaccination is the main thing that the experts continue to harp upon. And I hope Nigeria will move faster and pay more attention to the mass vaccination program that was announced not long ago by the MPACDA.
Right. What I'll just keep harping about this one, like I always normally harp up, is the fact that we're not doing enough as regards vaccination uptake, and people should go out there and go take the vaccine. The numbers are still very low. I think we just got to 21 million. And the funny thing is that the vaccines are out there. In fact, we've got varieties. We've got Pfizer, I hear. We still have AstraZeneca and the likes. And we've got Johnson & Johnson. People should go out there and take them. The vaccine uptake is low. We're having a resurgence of COVID-19. It's silent because we're not seeing deaths. So we should be careful. And probably another reason, maybe that might be attributed to that, is the fact that a sizable number of the population had COVID at one point or the other. So they've built some level of immunity, but it doesn't mean that they've taken the vaccine. We should just be careful. All right. Thank you so much, Adesua.